Back now to our top story, one of them anyway. Russia's rubles hit an all-time low today against the US dollar. They're calling it Black Monday. Let's talk about this with Patrick Young, expert on global financial markets. Black Monday, they're quick to term it that. What's it going to be, a brighter Tuesday or not?
Well, quite often when you see such a huge dislocation, actually, you do get some sort of a bounce in a marketplace. And certainly today, we saw at one stage the ruble was down more than 6% against the US dollar. It's closed the day in Moscow around about 5% down. Obviously came a little bit off its lows. We think there was probably a little bit of gentle intervention from the Russian central bank, trying to make things look a little bit calmer. But nonetheless, it's a huge fall all of a sudden, coming on top of what has been a pretty torrid year for the ruble itself.
Let's pin it down. Why has this happened now? What's particularly triggered it today?
Actually, very interesting. Why has it happened today? Perhaps it's because actually the USA has been on a holiday for the course of the weekend, the long weekend of Thanksgiving, and therefore markets this morning were probably a little bit more lazy and slow to move. I think a lot of people suddenly started to digest the news that came through from the OPEC meeting last week, whereas you remember OPEC decided they're going to keep pumping as much oil as they have done in the past. They're not going to restrict that supply. That started the oil market moving very early, and we saw Brent crude, West Texas Intermediate, off several dollars again this morning. That was causing, therefore, a push through because people have started to get very, very worried about the whole situation, because obviously the Russian budget is tied in some way to effectively $100 barrel oil, and we're looking at the moment at a price that's well below 70.
I mean, Russia's getting it from all sides. It's getting it from the sanctions as well, but of course a number of other oil-producing countries could be potentially much worse off. Some of their figures are set to balance their books at around $150 a barrel. I'm thinking Venezuela for one.
Absolutely. Venezuela is something like $150, $160. Iran, $180. There are multiple other countries that are really in trouble. And I mean, even actually at around about $65, $70 a barrel, many of the Gulf states themselves have got different issues with their budgets. And I'm not just talking about somewhere like Libya and other countries that have been troubled, but even the UAE is really somewhere around about this sort of ballpark figure. However, people have started really concentrating on the whole Russian story. What they're looking at there is obviously tied in with the sanctions issue, tied in with the whole Ukrainian problem. People are deeply concerned because they're looking at the idea that Russia does have debt that it needs to refinance in US dollars. But at the same time, we have to be reasonable at this juncture. Things are not as bleak as they might seem. For one thing, after all, a lot of Russian oil and gas that's being exported is actually paid for in foreign currency. So therefore, effectively, Russia is making more money in rubles than it expected to get previously. At the same time, obviously, there are worries about the dollar situation at the moment. Russia has to refund things. But let's think about this pragmatically. Russian government debt is actually very, very low. Compare it to somewhere like the Eurozone. Compare it to somewhere like Italy, 150% of GDP. Russian debt is actually a fraction of that at this juncture. Obviously, this is not reason to be in any way complacent.
Who benefits from a reduction in oil prices? I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of these airlines, for instance, they buy way in advance, don't they, to try and fix their prices. Is anyone going to benefit? Are we going to see flights coming down? Is it going to be cheaper at the pumps spectacularly or not?
Obviously, we are going to see lower prices at the pumps. People who use a lot of domestic gas will probably expect to see prices coming down. I'm in London today. Obviously, the taxi drivers are rejoicing. They're telling me they're saving £7, £10, £20 a week compared to what they were paying just a few months ago. And therefore, consumers will notice a certain impact across the world, provided you're in a country which, of course, has free market oil and gas in the first place. If you're heavily subsidized somewhere like Venezuela, you're not noticing any difference in the first place. There are issues. It is going to benefit. Obviously, every product in the world has to be transported, so therefore there will be some degree of deflation overall. The worry is, of course, that many governments have budgeted for a much, much higher oil price, and those who produce it and are now $30, $40, $50 or even $100 off from where they expect their books to balance, that's going to be a problem for the fundamental business of government.
A lot to talk as well about then between President Putin and Recep Tayyip Erdogan. He's in Turkey right now. We're going to be crossing there in a minute. They're hoping to have a press conference maybe that we'll be going to. That energy is going to be high on their agenda as well, isn't it? It's a big supplier, Russia, to Turkey, of course. Patrick, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks for your thoughts. Oh, well, unless you've got something dynamic, quickly. No.
I was just going to say, very interesting issue between Turkey and Russia. Obviously, there is a dynamism there. And one thing is also, it's a very key aspect to the eastern pivot. Turkey, growing incredibly fast, needs a huge amount of energy. Another possible source for Russia, and maybe also not going to be priced in dollars in the future. Perhaps they'll be buying in rubles or even Turkish lira. Very interesting talks coming up.
Lovely. Patrick, thanks for your thoughts. As always, nice to see you. Patrick Young, financial expert there on the markets in London, live with us.